Hello there. In this video, I'll be forecasting every gubernatorial election based on polls, approval ratings, fundraising, and more. And we're starting with a really interesting race in Maine. Incumbent Democrat Janet Mills faces her predecessor, Republican Paul LePage, who couldn't run in 2018 because it would have been his third consecutive term. Mills received nearly 51% of the vote in 2018, a greater vote share than LePage received in 2010 and 2014. Upon leaving office in 2018, LePage was the fourth least popular governor in the country. Mills currently has a net plus 11 approval rating, which puts her in the middle of the pack nationally. We don't have any recent polls, but two taken earlier this year showed Mills with a narrow lead. And as of June, Mills held a decent fundraising edge. 538 has Maine likely Democrat, which I think is a bit generous, but the stars are aligned for Mills. She's a Democratic incumbent in a bluish state who has more money, is more popular than her opponent, and has a lead in the polls. I have Maine lean Democrat for now. These next races don't require nearly as much analysis. In New Hampshire, Republican Chris Sununu faces Democrat Tom Sherman. The incumbent Sununu is polling 19 points ahead of Sherman. He's extremely popular, safe Republican. And in Vermont, the same analysis applies. Incumbent Republican Phil Scott will beat Democrat Brenda Siegel easily, safe Republican. Massachusetts is a bit more difficult to forecast. The state does have a history of electing moderate Republican governors, but the state is relatively liberal. Primaries are still a week away, but it'll likely be Massachusetts Attorney General and Democrat Maura Healey versus Republican Jeff Deal, who has been endorsed by Donald Trump. Deal ran against Elizabeth Warren for Senate in 2018 and lost by 24%. Polls show Healey up by 30 points, but none have been taken within the past month, and things may tighten up after the primaries, I don't know. Election forecasters don't really know either, ranking this race anywhere from lean Democrat to safe Democrat. For now, I'm grading this race likely Democrat. Poll after poll shows Healey cruising to victory, and she has a record of success in statewide elections. Deal doesn't really fit the bill as a moderate Republican that's been elected in the past in Massachusetts like Charlie Baker or Mitt Romney. In Rhode Island, the primaries take place on September 13th, and it's unclear if incumbent Dan McKee will even be the Democratic Party nominee. McKee became governor after Gina Raimondo was appointed as Secretary of Commerce by Joe Biden. Democratic primary polls show a close race between McKee, Nellie Gorbea, and Helena Foulkes. On the Republican side, Ashley Callis faces Jonathan Riccitelli. Callis has been endorsed by the Rhode Island Republican Party. Democrats have led the way in fundraising. On the Republican side, Callis' fundraising has been driven primarily by herself, as she has loaned her campaign more than $2 million. I have this race likely Democrat for now. Hopefully we'll get more clarity after the primaries, and a surprise result in either primary could potentially shift forecasts of this race. In Connecticut, incumbent Democrat Ned Lamont faces Republican Bob Stefanowski. This is a rematch of 2018 where Lamont won by 3.2%. Lamont has a net plus 23 approval rating, and polls taken 3 months ago showed Lamont with a decent lead. Both candidates are spending a lot of money funding their own campaigns. I'm going with the popular incumbent with the lead in the polls, likely Democrat. New York's a bit of an easier one. Incumbent Democrat Kathy Hochul will beat Republican Lee Zeldin by double digits, safe Democrat. In Pennsylvania, this is one race that everyone is watching. Pennsylvania's Attorney General, Democrat Josh Shapiro, faces Republican Doug Mastriano, a state senator. Mastriano has some pretty extremist views, and I've linked to a Rolling Stone article in the section below the subscribe button of this video if you want to learn more about them. Every poll has Shapiro ahead, but the margins range anywhere from 3 to 11 points. The only polls with Mastriano ahead have been pranks, hilariously elevated by his own campaign. Shapiro has raised by far the most money since the beginning of 2021. One thing that may benefit Mastriano is the fact that the current governor, Democrat Tom Wolf, is leaving office as one of the least popular governors, though his favorability is even with 46% approving and 46% disapproving. Just like in my Senate prediction, I have Pennsylvania lean Democrat for now. In Maryland, Republican Dan Cox faces Democrat Wes Moore. Current governor, Republican Larry Hogan, is term limited and cannot run again. As of July, Moore had a huge fundraising advantage. There's a very good chance Democrats flip Maryland, and in the absence of any polling, I'm calling this one likely Democratic, but it's hard to see Cox winning this race. In South Carolina, incumbent Republican Henry McMaster faces Democrat Joe Cunningham. McMaster has a net plus 16 approval rating as a Republican governor in a Republican state. That's why I have this one safe Republican. Before getting to Georgia, let's knock out two other safe states. In Tennessee, incumbent Republican Bill Lee faces Democrat Jason Martin and a long list of independent candidates. Even with no opponents, Lee received more primary votes than every Democrat combined. This one is safe Republican. In Alabama, incumbent Republican Kay Ivey faces Democrat Yolanda Flowers. This one will be a landslide, safe Republican. I know I said 2, but it's really 4. In Arkansas, Trump's former press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders faces Democrat Chris Jones. Another landslide, safe Republican. And in Oklahoma, Republican Kevin Stone faces Democrat Joy Hoffmeister. Another landslide, safe Republican. All right, let's talk about Georgia. Incumbent Republican Brian Kemp faces Democrat Stacey Abrams. It's a 2018 rematch in which Brian Kemp won, allegedly, by less than 2%. Polls show Kemp holding a narrow lead. The only poll where Abrams is tied with Kemp was sponsored by Democrat Charlie Bailey, who is running for lieutenant governor of Georgia. One poll also found Kemp with a +5 favorability rating compared to -4 for Abrams. However, Abrams has outraised Kemp pretty significantly, but a lot of that money is from out-of-state donors. For now, I have Georgia lean Republican. Florida should be another competitive race. Incumbent Republican and rising star Ron DeSantis faces Democrat Charlie Crist. DeSantis holds a net +12 approval rating in Florida. All the recent polls show DeSantis with a lead, even polls sponsored by Democratic Party groups. And DeSantis has way more money. He's even on track to break fundraising records. I have Florida likely Republican, though I wouldn't be surprised if DeSantis won by double digits. Let's travel north to Ohio. Incumbent Republican Mike DeWine faces Democrat Nan Whaley. DeWine has a net +21 approval rating and a double-digit lead in recent polls. I'm calling Ohio safe Republican. In Michigan, incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer faces Republican Tudor Dixon. Recent polls have Whitmer ahead by 4 to 11 points. Whitmer's approval rating isn't great, net -4, but the same poll found Biden's approval rating at 30%, which is about 12 points below where he is nationally. Whitmer does have the fundraising edge, but Dixon did lead the GOP field in fundraising too. I have Michigan lean Democrat for now, and will stay that way until Tudor Dixon can make up some ground in the polls. We'll get to Wisconsin in a minute, but first let's knock out some of these safe states. In Illinois, incumbent Democrat J.B. Pritzker will defeat Republican challenger Darren Bailey, safe Democrat. In Iowa, incumbent Republican Kim Reynolds will defeat Democratic challenger Deidre DeJear, safe Republican. In South Dakota, incumbent Republican Kristi Noem will defeat Democrat Jamie Smith, safe Republican. In Nebraska, Republican Jim Pillen will defeat Carol Blood, though I must admit it would be cool to be represented by someone named Governor Blood. Kind of sounds like a comic book villain, but safe Republican. All right, let's head up back to Wisconsin. Incumbent Democrat Tony Evers faces Republican Tim Michels. The latest polls show Evers with a narrow lead. Evers has an approval rating around net 0. Some polls show him slightly positive, some slightly negative. In terms of fundraising, as of the end of July, it's relatively close, though Evers does have a little bit more money. This one really is a true toss-up, but leaving a blank map is no fun at all. I'm calling it lean Democrat for now. Evers has more money, a lead in the polls, and is the incumbent. Please leave me a comment down below and tell me why I'm wrong. In Minnesota, incumbent Democrat Tim Walz faces Republican Scott Jensen. We haven't had any recent polls, but Walz has a lead in all of them by single digits. I think it's important to point out that Jensen consistently was the strongest Republican candidate in head-to-head polls versus Walz. Walz does have a lot more money. Recent polling shows Walz with around a 50-50 approval rating, 50% approving, 50% disapproving. Election forecasters are all over the map on this one, but I'm calling it lean Democrat for now, and I think it's safe to say that Walz won't win by double digits like he did in 2018. Let's knock out a couple more uncompetitive races. Wyoming is safe Republican, and Idaho is safe Republican. In Kansas, we have one of the most interesting races. Incumbent Democrat Laura Kelly faces Republican Derek Schmidt and independent Dennis Pyle. In 2018, Kelly only won a plurality of the vote because independent Greg Orman pulled in a decent percentage of that vote. I don't know if we'll see a repeat, but Kansas Republicans did try and fail to keep Pyle off the ballot. Kelly also has a strong net +22 approval rating. We only have one poll with all three candidates, and honestly, I think it belongs in the trash. It was conducted by a firm not rated by 538, sponsored by a Republican Party group. Kelly has also raised twice as much money as Schmidt. Again, this is a true toss-up, but that's no fun. Kelly is a relatively popular incumbent with more money. Her opponents fear a third-party spoiler, and Republican pollster shows her within the margin of error. I'm calling Kansas lean Democrat. In Texas, incumbent Republican Greg Abbott faces Democrat Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke had a lot of star power following his narrow defeat to Ted Cruz in 2018, and then he decided to waste it on an embarrassing presidential campaign. Abbott has a net +7 approval rating and leads in the polls by a similar margin. Regardless of your thoughts on gun control, I don't think Beto's public stances will do him any favors in Texas, but I do admire him standing firm with what he believes in. Both Beto and Abbott have raised a lot of money, but Abbott has significantly more cash on hand. I'm calling this race likely Republican as Beto mania continues to fizzle out. In Colorado, incumbent Democrat Jared Polis faces Republican Heidi Ganahl and Constitution Party candidate Danielle Neuschwanger. Polis has a strong net +24 approval rating and should also benefit from being on the ballot alongside Senator Michael Bennet. Trafalgar, a decent pollster but one with a Republican lead, found Polis leading by 5%. Polis also has a large fundraising advantage. We've seen Colorado become more blue than purple in the last several election cycles, and I expect that to continue, likely Democrat. Let's get two more easy ones out of the way. California and Hawaii are both safe Democrat. In New Mexico, incumbent Democrat Michelle Lujan Grisham faces Republican Mark Ronchetti. A new poll from the Albuquerque Journal has Lujan Grisham ahead by 7%. Lujan Grisham's approval rating is okay, net +6. Lujan Grisham has more money, but Ronchetti has really started to gain ground in fundraising. I'm calling this race lean Democrat for now. In Arizona, former TV anchor and Republican Kari Lake faces Democrat Katie Hobbs, Arizona's Secretary of State. The Republican primary for this race was a bit of a Pence versus Trump proxy war, with Donald Trump winning, not super surprising. We have two pretty recent polls, one with Hobbs up by 3%, one with Lake up by 1%. It was a little difficult to find the most recent fundraising data in this race, but Katie Hobbs has led the way. I don't know what to make of this race, and neither do most election forecasters, who all say this race is a true toss-up, but you know my rule, I don't leave blank spots on the map. Before the wave of rather significant GOP defeats, I would have been more likely to call this race lean Republican, but we can't ignore the national environment or the fact that the GOP is quickly losing its edge in what was supposed to be a red wave year. On average, Hobbs is a lead in the polls, and she has more money, plus she's running alongside an incumbent Democratic senator on the ballot. I have this race lean Democrat. I'll quickly say these rankings aren't permanent. I will do 2 or 3 more follow-up videos, so subscribe to the channel so you don't miss those. In Nevada, incumbent Democrat Steve Sisolak faces Republican Joe Lombardo. Sisolak holds a net +8 favorability rating. Recent polling shows an incredibly tight race. Trafalgar has Lombardo +3, Suffolk has Sisolak +3. My rather boring take on this race is that the outcome may be decided by turnout in the Senate race, where incumbent Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto faces Republican Adam Laxalt. If Republican turnout is high enough to flip the Senate seat, the governorship could flip with it, especially considering Sisolak is running behind Cortez Masto in the recent Suffolk University poll. But for now, I'm marking this race lean Democrat. I'm going to favor the relatively popular incumbent candidate, but make no mistake, this race will be very, very close, and this rating could change to lean R very quickly. In Oregon, Democrat Tina Kotek faces Republican Christine Drazan and independent Betsy Johnson. Kate Brown was term limited, leaving office with a net -15 approval rating. Yikes. Make no mistake here, Betsy Johnson isn't one of those also-ran independent candidates. She's a former Democrat and currently has a lead in fundraising. To quote Larry Sabato's crystal ball, the state is hosting an unusual 3-way race among a trio of women who are all recent members of the state legislature. The race sets up an unusual situation where the winner may not even need to crack 40%. We don't have any recent polls, but an internal Betsy Johnson poll conducted earlier this summer shows Tina Kotek with 33% of the vote, Johnson with 30%, and Drazan with 23%. And that's how I'd rate their chances. Kotek with the best chance of winning, Johnson second, Drazan third. And for that reason, I have this race lean Democrat. Maybe next time we'll be able to use that independent gold. In Alaska, incumbent Republican Mike Dunleavy faces Democrat Les Guerra, Republican Charlie Pierce, and independent Bill Walker. Dunleavy has a solid +20 approval rating. We're short on polls, and I can imagine Alaska is a difficult state to survey, but what we do have shows Dunleavy winning on the second round of ranked choice voting. The weakest candidate in the race right now is Republican Charlie Pierce. Odds are the second choice among most of his supporters will be the other Republican in the race, that's Dunleavy. Dunleavy won the nonpartisan primary with 40% of the vote and should pull in a handful of percentage points from the candidates who didn't make the cut. It may take a second or third round of ranked choice voting, but I expect Dunleavy to win, and I'm calling this likely Republican. And there you have it, 25 Democratic governors, 25 Republican governors. Agree, disagree, comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to keep up with the midterm elections.